Then the lead void swarm entity simply disintegrated. The massive creature that had survived direct hits from antimatter weapons and absorbed the energy from plasma cannons was torn apart in microseconds. Tungsten rods, moving at 20% light speed, punched through its organic hull like bullets through paper, each impact releasing energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. The creature died so quickly that its nervous system never had time to register the damage, much less adapt to it. One moment it was a living predator capable of consuming starships. The next it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. The remaining void swarm entities turned toward this new threat, their biohulls rippling as they attempted to analyze what had attacked them. Their sensors detected no energy signatures, no recognizable weapon emissions. As far as they could determine, their companion had simply exploded spontaneously. The second creature lasted exactly 2.3 seconds longer than the first. Its adaptive biology attempted to strengthen its hull against kinetic impact, but the tungsten rods were traveling too fast and hitting too hard for any biological adaptation to matter. The laws of physics were absolute, and momentum transfer was not negotiable. The third entity tried to retreat, but human targeting computers had already calculated its trajectory. The projectiles that destroyed it had been fired before the creature even began to move, crossing interstellar space at velocities that made escape impossible. In less than 4 minutes, a void swarm force that had consumed 2 civilized worlds was completely annihilated. The aftermath brought a flood of communications from across the galaxy. Fleet commanders who had watched their energy weapons prove useless against the void swarm demanded to know how humanity had achieved such devastating results. Scientists requested detailed analysis of human kinetic weapons technology. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions to discuss the implications. Prime Axiom's message arrived 12 hours after the engagement, his crystalline form visibly shaken. Admiral Chen, the Council requests your immediate presence at Nexus Prime. We need to discuss your species weapons capabilities, Sarah replied with the same diplomatic courtesy that Elena Vasquez had shown 20 years earlier. We would be honored to assist the Council's understanding of our technology. The emergency session of the Galactic Trade Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives materialized in their habitation pods with unprecedented speed, their usual formal ceremonies abandoned in favor of urgent discussion. The chamber that had once echoed with laughter at human primitive technology now buzzed with desperate whispers and confused theories. Explain, Prime Axiom said simply when Sarah took her position at the chamber's center. Your weapons produced no energy signatures, no detectable emissions, yet they achieved what our most advanced weapons could not. Sarah activated her holographic projector, showing the same basic principles that Elena Vasquez had demonstrated 2 decades earlier. Electromagnetic mass acceleration, she explained. We use magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to extreme velocities. But the energy requirements, protested Flux 47, its plasma form flickering with agitation. The power needed to achieve such velocities should be enormous. It is, Sarah agreed. That's why we built 12,963 platforms across 43 star systems. Each array stores energy for months before firing. When we engage a target, we're releasing the accumulated power of entire solar collection networks. The implications struck the Council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been conducting primitive mining operations in Zone 7. They had been building the largest weapons network in galactic history, disguised as industrial infrastructure. Node 883's mechanical voice carried a tone of grudging respect. Analysis indicates that kinetic weapons cannot be absorbed or adapted to by void swarm biology. The projectiles transfer momentum through direct physical contact, operating on principles that transcend energy manipulation. Correct, Sarah confirmed. While you developed ways to manipulate exotic energy and alter matter at quantum levels, we focused on the most basic law in physics. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. There's no defense against momentum transfer at relativistic speeds. Prime Axiom's crystalline form chimed softly as he processed the revelation. Your species has been preparing for this threat for 20 years. Not this specific threat, Sarah replied. But we knew that any sufficiently advanced enemy would likely be able to counter energy-based weapons. Kinetic weapons represent the one form of attack that remains effective regardless of technological advancement. The galaxy learned a hard lesson that day about the power of fundamental physics. Applied with patience and precision, humanity's primitive kinetic weapons proved to be the most advanced weapons system in known space, precisely because they operated on principles that couldn't be countered or adapted to. The Void Swarm War ended 3 months later, with human kinetic platforms providing the decisive firepower that drove the invaders back into dark space. The galaxy that had once laughed at electromagnetic projectile acceleration now recognized it as the pinnacle of weapons technology. Humanity took its place among the galaxy's great powers not through exotic energy manipulation or reality-altering technologies, but through the patient application of physics so fundamental that everyone else had forgotten its devastating potential. The universe had learned to respect the species that weaponized momentum itself. Marcus smiled grimly. Let them laugh. They've just given us the resources to build the most devastating artillery network in galactic history, and when the next crisis comes, they'll learn that sometimes the most advanced solution is also the simplest one. The human delegation prepared to depart Nexus Prime, carrying with them the official documents granting humanity control over Zone 7. To the galaxy, they appeared to be another primitive species receiving charity from more advanced civilizations. In reality, they had just been handed the keys to humanity's greatest strategic opportunity. As their modest ship pulled away from the massive station, Elena looked back at the glittering lights of galactic civilization. Somewhere among those stars, the galaxy's enemies were already planning their next move. They would assume that humanity's kinetic weapons were just another primitive technology to be adapted to or overcome. They would be wrong. Time passed slowly in the outer rim, territories of Zone 7. 15 years flowed by like a gentle river, unmarked by the great events that shaped galactic civilization. The galaxy's attention remained focused on trade disputes, territorial negotiations, and the endless politics of 17 different species trying to coexist in peace. The Revelation Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Titan Station, watching the final installation of Platform Array 2847. The massive electromagnetic launcher stretched across 15 kilometers of space, its magnetic coils gleaming in the light of the system's distant star. To casual observers, it looked like another mining platform, designed to process asteroid materials or launch cargo containers to distant colonies. Sarah had inherited both her position and her purpose from the previous generation of human leaders. At 38, she represented the new generation of humanity that had grown up knowing they were preparing for something the galaxy couldn't yet imagine. Her mother had been Elena Vasquez's protégée, and Sarah carried forward the patient strategy that had guided humanity for nearly 2 decades. Final calibration complete, Admiral, reported Commander James Park from his position at the station's primary control center. Platform 2847 is online and integrated with the network. That brings our total operational arrays to 12,963 units across all 43 systems. Sarah nodded with satisfaction. The construction had taken 15 years of careful work, disguised as the kind of industrial development that any growing civilization might undertake. The galaxy's occasional survey teams had noted humanity's unusual enthusiasm for asteroid mining and orbital construction, but attributed it to inefficient primitive engineering rather than strategic military preparation. Any word from Deep Space Monitoring about the anomalies? Sarah asked. Commander Park's expression grew serious as he consulted his data displays. The pattern is accelerating. We've lost contact with 17 observation posts along the galactic rim in the past 6 months. The last transmission from Station Omega-7 was particularly disturbing. Sarah had read the classified reports multiple times. Something was moving through the void between galaxies, consuming everything in its path. The attacks showed no pattern that galactic strategists could understand, no technology that their scientists could analyze. Entire systems simply went dark, leaving behind only empty space and the lingering traces of exotic radiation. Show me the latest intelligence assessment, Sarah requested. The holographic display filled with tactical data collected from across the galaxy's outer territories. The entities called themselves the Void Swarm, though whether that was a species designation or a description of their nature remained unclear. They traveled in massive organic constructs that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. making them difficult to detect until they were already attacking. What made them truly terrifying was their apparent immunity to conventional weapons. Energy attacks were simply absorbed and converted into fuel for their growth. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, and even exotic matter weapons had proven completely ineffective. The creatures seemed to feed on energy itself, growing stronger with every weapon fired at them. The Galactic Defense Force has lost 67 major warships in the past month, Commander Park reported. Admiral Zethran's battle group was completely destroyed trying to defend the Altair colonies. The Void Swarm consumed the entire fleet, then used the absorbed energy to spawn additional entities. Sarah studied the tactical data with growing interest. The Void Swarm represented exactly the kind of enemy that human strategists had theorized they might eventually face. An opponent that could adapt to and counter energy-based attacks, rendering the galaxy's most advanced weapons useless. It was the nightmare scenario that had driven human military development for 2 decades. While the galaxy perfected exotic energy manipulation, humanity had focused on the most fundamental force in the universe, kinetic energy. You couldn't absorb momentum. You couldn't adapt to having your molecular structure physically disrupted by projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Incoming priority transmission from Nexus Prime, announced the communications officer. It's marked as an emergency council directive. The transmission carried the official seal of the Galactic Trade Council, its crystalline patterns indicating maximum priority. When the message played, it showed Prime Axiom himself, his normally composed crystalline form flickering with obvious stress. To all member species and protectorates, the message began. The galaxy faces an unprecedented threat. The entities known as the Void Swarm have penetrated our outer defenses and are advancing toward core systems. All available military assets are requested to assist in defensive operations. The message continued with specific assignments for various species and their fleets. The Zethran would coordinate energy weapon arrays. The morphic entities would provide exotic matter manipulation. The Krell Collective would supply computational support for tactical analysis. Humanity's assignment came at the end, almost as an afterthought. Human forces are requested to provide logistical support and system patrol duties in the Outer Rim territories. Your kinetic weapon platforms may be useful for asteroid clearance and debris removal during fleet movements. Sarah almost smiled at the casual dismissal. Even facing annihilation, the galaxy still considered human weapons suitable only for manual labor and cleanup operations. They had no idea that humanity's primitive kinetic weapons represented the only force in the galaxy capable of actually harming the Void Swarm. Prepare the fleet for deployment, Sarah ordered. Full activation of all platforms, maximum readiness status. It's time to show the galaxy what electromagnetic mass acceleration really means. The human response fleet that departed Zone 7 consisted of 847 vessels, each one carrying targeting coordinates for the vast network of hidden platforms scattered across 43 star systems. To galactic observers, it looked like a respectable contribution from a developing species, though nothing that would significantly impact the war effort. They had no idea they were looking at the most devastating weapons network ever constructed. The first engagement took place in the Kepler 438 system, where a Void Swarm advance force was consuming the orbital mining colonies. The creatures appeared as massive organic constructs that seemed to bend space around them, their surfaces rippling with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the UHS Thunderbolt as 3 Void Swarm entities moved through the system like hungry predators. Each creature was larger than a city, their organic hulls pulsing with absorbed energy from the colonies they had already consumed. All platforms report ready, announced her tactical officer. We have firing solutions calculated for all targets. Engage, Sarah said simply. To outside observers, nothing visible happened. The human ships didn't fire brilliant energy beams or launch spectacular missiles. Their electromagnetic arrays pulsed briefly with power, but the energy signatures were so brief that most sensors barely registered them. The mockery. The vast chambers of Nexus Prime stretched across 3 kilometers of polished quantum crystal, its walls shimmering with the light from nearby binary stars. Representatives from 17 different species floated in their specialized habitation pods. each designed to accommodate the unique biological needs of the Galactic Trade Council's most influential members. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the great amphitheater, her simple gray diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the exotic technologies surrounding her. At 42, she had dedicated her life to this moment, preparing humanity's first formal application to join the galactic community. Her dark eyes remained steady despite the weight of 8 billion human souls resting on her shoulders. Zethran Prime Axiom rose from his crystalline formation pod, his body a living sculpture of translucent minerals that caught and refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. As the eldest member of the Council, his species had overseen galactic diplomacy for over 12,000 years. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like musical chimes. "We welcome the representative of the species calling themselves humans," Prime Axiom announced, his tone carrying polite but distant interest. "Your application has been reviewed by our Technical Assessment Committee. Please present your species' primary technological achievements for Council evaluation." Elena activated her holographic projector, filling the chamber's center with images of human civilization. Earth appeared first, showing sprawling cities and orbital stations, followed by the growing colonies on Mars, Europa, and the asteroid belt. The display was impressive by human standards, though she noticed several council members shifting in their pods with what appeared to be barely contained amusement. "My species has developed sustainable fusion power, quantum computing networks, and closed-loop ecological systems," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation matrix. "We have also pioneered advanced electromagnetic propulsion systems and kinetic weapons platforms that we call Project Thunderbolt Morphic. Entity Flux 47, pulsed with golden energy from its containment field, its plasma-based consciousness flickering with what the translation system interpreted as laughter." "Kinetic weapons?" Did she say kinetic weapons? The entity's voice carried a musical quality that somehow managed to sound condescending. "How wonderfully primitive." Krell Collective Node 883 whirred softly as its mechanical components processed the information. The machine intelligence had existed for over 8 millennia, its consciousness distributed across millions of interconnected processors. When it spoke, its voice carried the certainty of absolute computational power. "Analysis indicates human technology operates on principles our species mastered approximately 6,000 years ago. Kinetic projectiles represent the most basic form of weapon development." Elena maintained her composure despite the growing murmur of amusement rippling through the chamber. She had expected this reaction. Human intelligence agencies had spent decades analyzing intercepted galactic communications, learning about the Council's preference for energy-based weapons and exotic physics manipulation. They knew exactly how primitive their technology would appear. "Perhaps we could observe a demonstration of these kinetic weapons," Prime Axiom suggested, his crystalline form chiming softly. The Council always appreciates practical applications of new technologies. The holographic display shifted to show a test facility in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. A massive electromagnetic array stretched across several kilometers, its magnetic coils glowing with stored energy. Human technicians moved around the installation like tiny ants, making final preparations for the demonstration. "Project Thunderbolt represents our most advanced weapons technology," Elena explained as the demonstration began. "We use electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to extremely high velocities. The array activated with a brilliant flash of electrical energy. A tungsten rod, no larger than a telephone pole, shot from the launching mechanism and streaked across space toward a target asteroid 300 kilometers away. The impact was spectacular, turning the kilometer-wide rock into an expanding cloud of superheated debris. Silence filled the chamber for exactly 3.7 seconds. Then the laughter began. Flux 47's energy form flickered rapidly, producing sounds that the translation system rendered as hysterical giggling. They accelerated a metal stick using magnetism. "Oh, this is precious. What's next, slings and arrows?" Node 883's mechanical voice carried a tone of analytical dismissal. "Energy expenditure calculations indicate massive inefficiency. Our plasma cannons achieve equivalent destructive force using 0.0003% of the power requirements demonstrated. Even some of the more diplomatic species couldn't suppress their amusement." The Aquari delegates' tentacles writhed in patterns that indicated barely controlled mirth, while the silicon-based patrons vibrated at frequencies that their species used for expressing absurd humor. Prime Axiom raised one crystalline appendage, calling for order, while the human demonstration shows enthusiasm for their chosen technological path. The Council must evaluate practical applications within galactic society. Elena watched the proceedings with carefully maintained dignity. Everything was proceeding exactly as human strategists had predicted. The galaxy's advanced civilizations had become so focused on exotic energy manipulation and reality-altering technologies that they had forgotten the fundamental power of simple physics applied with precision and scale. The Council recognizes humanity's potential for development, Prime Axiom continued, consulting data streams that flowed through his crystalline matrix. However, your current technological level requires careful placement within galactic civilization. We hereby assign your species to Resource Extraction Zone 7, consisting of 43 star systems in the Outer Rim territories. Elena had studied the maps of Zone 7 extensively. The region contained mostly barren systems with asteroid fields, gas giants, and worlds unsuitable for most forms of galactic life. It was essentially a cosmic junkyard, the kind of place where the galaxy dumped species too primitive to be trusted with anything important. We are honored by the Council's generous allocation, Elena replied, bowing formally. Humanity accepts these territories with gratitude and looks forward to contributing to galactic prosperity. The response surprised several Council members. Most primitive species either begged for better treatment or protested their assignments. The humans' gracious acceptance suggested a refreshing understanding of their place in the cosmic hierarchy as the formal session concluded and representatives began dispersing to their various ships and stations. Elena made her way through the crystalline corridors toward the human delegation's modest quarters. Her diplomatic training kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Captain Marcus Chen was waiting in their temporary diplomatic suite, his weathered face showing the kind of patience that came from decades of military service. At 55, he had commanded humanity's deep space exploration fleets since before first contact with galactic civilization. His calm demeanor hid one of the sharpest strategic minds in human history. "How did it go?" Marcus asked, though his slight smile suggested he already knew. "Exactly as predicted," Elena replied, finally allowing herself to relax. "They've given us Zone 7, 43 systems full of asteroids, gas giants, and raw materials. They think we're too primitive to be dangerous." Marcus walked to the suite's observation window, looking out at the vast construction yards of Nexus Prime. Massive ships moved through the facility like migrating whales, their hulls bristling with energy, weapons, and defensive systems that represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology. And they never bothered to calculate the true potential of kinetic weapons, scaled up to industrial proportions, Marcus observed. They saw our demonstration and thought inefficient. They never considered what happens when you build 10,000 of those arrays. Elena joined him at the window, watching a Zethran battlecruiser being fitted with new plasma cannon arrays. The ship was beautiful in its own way, all flowing curves and crystalline formations that could channel devastating energy across interstellar distances. It represented everything the galaxy considered advanced warfare. "How long do you think we'll have?" she asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. Human intelligence suggested that major galactic crises occurred roughly every 15 to 20 years. Based on historical patterns they had managed to decode, "Long enough to build what we need," he said finally. "The galaxy thinks in terms of energy and exotic matter. They've forgotten that momentum equals mass times velocity, and that kinetic energy scales with the square of velocity." Elena nodded, thinking about the classified reports she had read before departing Earth. Project Thunderbolt was just the beginning. Human engineers were already designing electromagnetic arrays that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. When scaled up to industrial proportions and distributed across 43 star systems, the cumulative firepower would be unprecedented in galactic history. "The Council members were so amused by our primitive weapons," Elena said. "They have no idea that we've weaponized physics itself."